top 10 challenges while implementing Avalara for your business's sales tax. I've had the pleasure of working with over 1,000 clients, and I've seen it all. I've seen all the different challenges when it comes to implementing your Avalara tax engine, as well as your tax returns and exemption certificates, handling it all through Avalara. I do believe that Avalara is an incredibly good solution for this. The problem is that most people go into it believing that everything is going to be automatic, already set up and ready to go out of the box. Unfortunately, this is like buying a piece of furniture from IKEA. There are a lot of moving parts, and to be the one to actually put them together, the more complex your business, the more nuance there is. You need to know these challenges if you're considering Avalara or already in the process of it, and if you've gotten stuck along the way. Avalara is an incredibly good solution, but you need to know how to implement it properly to avoid major pitfalls or additional costs from time, effort, energy, and knowing how to do this. I'm going to walk you through these top 10 challenges so that you can have a plan for overcoming these challenges and being prepared for it. The first thing to be aware of is the challenges with integrating Avalara with your ERP. In other words, the connection between your enterprise resource planning system, accounting systems, point of sale, online shopping cart needs to be perfect. If it's off by just a little bit, you're going to be dealing with that issue down the road with governments sending letters saying you've undercollected, or maybe you've overcollected tax and now you've got to refund all this money to clients. It's not a good customer experience. This needs to be perfect. Before launching your tax engine, make sure you're testing this, it's behaving properly, and information is flowing correctly. Imagine the plumbing in your home or the electrical in your home, right? You need to make sure that everything is flowing properly, no leaks, no backups, and no redundancies. You're not duplicating efforts. That's what I mean by information flows and testing. These are the main things when integrating with your ERP, Oracle, NetSuite, QuickBooks. You just want to make sure that you're not seeing the tax coming up in multiple places, being calculated twice. Avalara has a lot of ways you can configure it. It's very customizable. You need to architect your system in a way that streams and flows very efficiently, effectively, and nicely. You also don't want to have inefficiencies where you're calculating tax too much, or you may be calculating the correct tax rate, but you might be duplicating your efforts. Avalara charges extra for that. By making everything efficient, you're reducing your cost, you're making sure your costs are under control, you're making sure you're collecting the right tax and avoiding problems. Testing in a sandbox or in a made up environment first, you're actually going to prevent any issues from happening. Of course, you don't want to get stuck testing and never launch production. Spend time focusing on testing, but you get to a point where you feel confident about your setup. And there are so many different technologies that you can set this up with in so many different ways that you may need help with integrating it with your technology, and you may need help with architecting this in a way that makes the most sense for your business. If you don't have a dedicated IT person, technical knowledge, or time, I work with clients who are the only person in their finance company. They're the CFO and they haven't hired an accountant yet. They haven't hired anyone they don't have access to IT people. So they reach out to implementation partners and consultants to help them out with this part of the process and get this part of their business taken care of. As you can see, here's a list of integrations that are pretty common. NetSuite and then QuickBooks I've already mentioned, but also Shopify. That's probably one of the most common. A lot of clients who are Shopify clients are using the Avalara tax engine, and that's an important one. That's a big one. SAP, if you're a bigger company, a lot of larger companies sometimes will use SAP. You have Zoho, you have Salesforce CPQ, Workday Zora, Microsoft Dynamics, Odoo. All of these have different configurations, and no two businesses are alike, like I said, and no two ERPs are alike. So there is a lot of research and preparation work you have to do if you're going to do this on your own. The next problem that we're going to talk about here, the next challenges that you need to be aware of before getting started with sales tax in general, not just with Avalara, but sales tax in general, is knowing when you really have a sales tax nexus. I work with clients who say, hey, I need to register. I need to register in all states. And I said, what makes you think that? And like, I thought I do business in different states, so I should probably register there, right? I said, not necessarily. There are certain requirements that would make you have to register in those states. But before that, you're just volunteering. You want to make sure that you're doing this in the most effective way possible. There are times where it makes sense for you to get registered before you have a Nexus. If you just know you're going to have a situation where you're going to have a large taxable situation, you're going to want to go ahead and get registered because you'll be proactive about it. But in most cases, do a Nexus study. You want to understand where is your revenue coming from, what is being sold, what's the nature of business that you're doing, who at your company, do you have physical presences in those states, and a lot of these other things. Avalara is known for their Nexus map, as you can see here on my screen. They will let you know as you get close to a threshold or surpass the threshold, but they cannot track physical Nexus. They won't know if you have a building or hired an employee. They won't know that's triggering a Nexus. They're only tracking economic Nexus, not physical Nexus. So to get a real understanding, you should get a Nexus study, especially if you have any level of uncertainty. Now, if you've been doing business for a long time and you have no idea whether you may have an obligation or you may be in a taxable situation, but you're not collecting tax, you're going to need a risk assessment. You need to understand exactly where you stand with all these states. Now, Dakota versus Wayfair came into effect in 2018. So if you've been in business in any state since 2018, you're at risk. So you need to do an assessment. Where is my Nexus? So that if there are any sales tax obligations, you're handling those proactively and you're not waiting for the state to come after you and put a lien on your company or bank accounts. Do a risk assessment, either self-assess or have a consultant, accountant, or have an implementation partner. Reach out to someone who's professional to do this risk assessment. And I've worked with a lot of clients on these different aspects. The number 3 issue is applying for sales tax registration. Now that you have a sales tax nexus or you've created one, how do you apply? Let's say you have to apply in so many different states. Every state's going to have a different application. Every state's going to have a different license. Every state's going to have different renewal requirements. How do you maintain this? Where do you store it? How do you keep it safe? How do you make sure that you're updating it properly every so often and making sure everything is maintained? Setting up sales tax accounts with the states. Every state has different requirements. If you're registering in multiple states, you have to multiply efforts. If you don't have a dedicated person at your company, this could be time consuming. Be aware this is part of the process. There's a lot of work that has to get done if you're getting started with sales tax. A lot of things to do up front, and applying for sales tax registrations is a big one. Next is setting up your tax returns. There seems to be a misunderstanding that when you set up Avalara is going to take care of setting up all the tax returns, or it's like a one-click, once and done kind of thing. Unfortunately, it's not. This is the biggest challenge. It's a long process and time consuming. After you get registered, you have to build the automation within Avalara. It's a process. You have to set it up, click on the right, give the correct information, and then Avalara has to go in and approve it. And this process could take up to 30 days. Now imagine managing that for 20, 30, 40 states. It's quite a lot. So quite a lot of time and effort. It's easy to get mixed up and make mistakes. Some people click on the wrong form because it's off by a single letter or single digit, and it does require maintenance. So you will get letters in the mail periodically from the states changing their requirements. So you have to keep an eye on, I've seen people miss the letter and then go 6 months, a year without doing it, and then the state will come back and slap them on the wrist by assessing a penalty and interest. It requires maintenance, and that's the biggest challenge. After that, let's talk about managing transactions. Imagine you have everything set up. Now you have this monthly routine. You got to make sure you're reviewing your transactions every day, making sure the product codes are right on each transaction, making sure that the amounts are correct, the tax is as accurate as you can get it to be. Checking the tax logic, making sure that if there's exempt customers, that they've been exempt for the right reasons, and making sure that the transactions are committed to a tax report at the end of the month. So this does require daily work effort. This does require monthly and weekly periodic reviews to make sure that everything is nice and tight and that all of your reporting is accurate, not missing any information, not under collecting, so you can avoid any tax penalties, interest, and these kinds of things. And then just having to deal with the paperwork that comes with that is arduous and time consuming. Yeah, you, like I said, may not be the one that has a lot of resources at your disposal. You might be the only person at your company dealing with this. You might have a team of people, but regardless, this has to get done. And it's got to get done by someone. If you let it run, it's like putting a machine in a factory on autopilot and having no quality assurance, no one checking on it, something stuck might cause a backup, and then suddenly your entire factory is backed up with problems. You have to go back and fix it. That's why you have to have somebody watching the conveyor belt, making sure they don't have to do much heavy lifting. They just have to make sure nothing's getting stuck. The next challenge is managing customers' sales tax exemptions. This gets overlooked a lot. You don't realize how much they care about this. The states issuing the exemptions. Look at it like this. Your sales tax exemption certificate, you may as well look at it like a cash that's like worth like whatever the amount of the exemption was, right? So imagine your customer, you sold a product to your customer, the tax on it ends up being $100,000 or $200,000. And they say, I have an exemption, here's my certificate. That one piece of paper they give you, that's $200,000 right there. If you don't have that piece of paper at the time of audit, you owe that $200,000 right there. The exemption certificates are so valuable, so important. People don't realize that the first thing an auditor is going to do most of the time is going to come in and ask you, let me see your book of exemptions. They're going to want to see when it was received, that it was properly filed, and with you at the time that you invoiced that customer's transaction and exempted it for the right reason and classified in the right ways. So you have to make sure that you have a good policy and put the data correctly and you have the correct exemption certificate. I see people sending just any old form and it's just not the right thing. You need to have a reference of what you're looking for. And that's all built into Avalara, but there is still oversight that you have to deal with in order to make sure that everything is, you can approve it, check it off. And especially if you have larger exemptions, like the bigger the exemption, the more important that it is. And managing customer sales tax exemptions, a very big challenge that most people are just not thinking about when they're setting up systems. You got to be aware of that. It's very important. Number 7, managing tax notices. You will get letters in the mail. Even if you do everything perfectly, you're going to get tax notices in the mail simply because the state might send you a letter because the payment was a day later and they had sent you a letter, and you're just going to get letters randomly. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. The important thing is that you are managing them as they're coming in and you don't let them sit and pile up, because if you do, you need to make sure that they're getting handled as soon as they're coming in, and make sure that you're actually getting them, because they're only sending them in the mail. A lot of people are not monitoring their mailbox like that. And so they get overlooked and then it piles up and it becomes a problem. Interest, penalties. We want to avoid that. We want to avoid all these hidden costs with sales tax. Very expensive, non-revenue generating aspect of business that we have to make sure that we make it as efficient and tight as possible. Make sure you log, validate, and respond as soon as you can. Next, reconciling monthly, quarterly, and annual returns, right? Just because Avalara is filing your return doesn't mean that's right. You do need to take the extra step of reviewing, reconciling, and approving or taking corrective action for these tax returns. Every single month, Avalara is going to file a bunch of returns. Before they file the returns, they give you a chance to review them. You need to take that chance. There's a 5-day window where you're going to be able to look at the return, look at your records, make sure it matches, and approve it. If there's something wrong with it, now's the time to do it. Otherwise, they're going to withdraw the money right out of your bank account without you having a chance to do anything. If you catch the problem early, you'll save a lot of headache. So you want to make sure that you're accurately reconciling your monthly, quarterly, and annual returns. And next is backfiling missed returns and fixing the wrong ones. If you manage your tax notices and customer exemptions properly, you won't have to worry about backfiling missed returns and fixing incorrect ones, because all those other things get to this point where, but sometimes things fall through the cracks and you got to go back and backfile mixed returns and fixing the ones that are incorrect. So if you catch any ones that are just not right, you will have to correct them. If you paid too much tax, you're going to refund. If you paid too little tax, you got to pay the tax, right? Number 10, managing your Avalara contracts and subscription terms. I know, because I've worked with a lot of clients, Avalara, dealing with them is not easy. Their account management teams are overwhelmed. They are typically given a book of business to handle that is more than they can handle. I've worked with account managers that have had 1,200 customers that they deal with. Imagine your inbox getting slammed all day, not possible to keep up. So you're gonna have a hard time reaching anyone at Avalara. Unless they change their systems, that's just how they've been and that's just how they are. But I have a close pulse on things because, like I said, I work with a lot of clients. I know how it is. I work with Avalara on behalf of my clients, and I help them with their annual contract renewals and help them with dealing with account management teams. It's about having an efficient contract management process. So you do need to do your annual contract reviews, probably even semi-annual if you can, to make sure that your subscriptions are the right fit, make sure that you have the correct quantities of everything that you need to get the most efficient and the best offerings that Avalara can provide for you.